Well, hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough, joined by two lovely ladies today. My always co-host, Rachel, who hasn't been here for a couple weeks because she's been a little under the weather. How you doing, Rachel?
I'm doing good. I think we've recovered from the whatever the respiratory bug is that's been going around.
Yeah, between that and your new home, Homestead, you're a busy lady. So, yeah.
Yes.
But my other guest today, or our guest today, is Melissa Kane Norris. Melissa, how are you?
I'm good. We were just reminiscing before we started recording how long it had
Yeah,
been since we talked, and my goodness, does time fly? But I'm super
yeah.
happy to get a chance to chat with you again. I always enjoy our conversations.
Yeah, 2017. So we're way past due on having you on the podcast for
Oh,
sure.
time
But
flies.
I've been so amazed by all the things you're doing. I just sit back and watch. And it's now back in the day, I felt like you had a little bit of that celebrity status back then, but now it's like I'm in awe. So
Oh gosh, bless your heart. There is nothing. There is no celebrity.
yeah,
That's
well,
super sweet of you.
you have so much going on. There's just so many things we could touch on. But the main thing we have you on for today because you have a new book coming out next month. Is it next month it's coming out?
Yes, official release date is May 6th. So
But you
yeah.
can pre-order, and we're going to talk about that and stuff. And yeah, and it looks, I got a little review copy there, and I've been skimming through it and reading stuff, and it's amazing. And always love your stuff. You do some great stuff, so we'll talk about that, of course.
Thank
And
you.
but before we jump into that, Rachel and I, we kind of always take a few minutes to begin with a podcast. And we just kind of talk about what we're doing on our homestead. So we just want to include you in that conversation today. Kind of what's going on in your homestead in the last few days? Anything new, or it's that busy time of the year, so I imagine there's a lot going on. What are you up to?
Yeah, well, I actually got my peppers and tomato seed starts, and almost all the peppers have germinated. I was just checking them before I came on. The jalapenos are always, they just take the longest. Like, bless their
Mm,
hearts, they're like, we want a little extra time and heat. So, aside from the jalapenos, all the peppers and tomatoes have germinated, which makes my heart happy. But what I'm very excited about is we just came off of 4 days of rain, and it's now 65 degrees and sunny out, which
Oh,
means I am morel hunting this weekend. And I'm so excited
yes.
because it's such a short season, but I love morel. So, anyway, I'm
Mhm.
like, okay. Yes, they should be popping, and I can't wait to go get my hands on some. It's like the
yeah.
ultimate adult Easter egg hunt looking for
Yep.
morels, and I'm
Yes.
like, I'm ready.
You just
Nice.
had a lady on your episode on a podcast episode of yours, and talking about that, and it was really really good. And wow, I could listen to her all day. That country accent of hers was pretty entertaining.
Wasn't that fun? I know. I'm like,
It was.
you could just say anything you want, and I'm
I
just gonna
know.
sit here and listen. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a really good episode. But yeah, that is fun. You're right. I love the mushroom season. You're Sounds like you guys are probably 2 or 3 weeks ahead of us on that.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe a little bit
it's
more even
crazy.
than us.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
in Michigan. Yeah, Rachel's in Michigan. I'm in Indiana. So you're. I would have thought you guys would have maybe been a little behind us, but that up
Well,
there, I guess.
it's so funny because I'm really far north, so Western Washington State, northern part, like Canada, the
Hmm.
Canadian border is about an hour and a half from us. But what's
Okay.
funny is we're temperament, or I should say, we stay fairly mild because we are on the coastal side, even though I'm up in the foothills. But so
Hmm.
what's interesting is like right now we're like 38, 40 degrees Fahrenheit overnight lows. And then sometimes during the day, if it's sunny and clear, anywhere between like 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit on the sunny days. But we'll pretty much stay here, but then when we're cloudy, we're like 43 degrees and rainy. And like that's our high and our low's 38. So there's not like this huge swing, but we
Hmm.
don't
Okay.
warm up with all of that cold rain. And so we have a really long spring. So like temperature wise, it's fine for the morels right now. But like as far as like warm weather gardening plants, like I usually can't put hardly any of that out until about Memorial weekend, unless it's in a
Okay.
high tunnel or greenhouse environment.
Yeah.
Um, just because we just don't get warm, like it's not warm enough to really warm the soil up.
Right.
So it's funny, like we're
Mm.
early on this part compared to you guys, but then I feel like we're so late on our like warm weather planting dates. It's just a really
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
long spring.
That's
Anyways,
what I was just gonna
yeah.
say. It just sounds like you have really long shoulder seasons. Is your fall
Yes,
similar, just really long? Okay. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We're the
Yeah.
opposite. It's like suddenly spring is here and it's boom, it's here. But for us, spring is not going to, I don't know, mushrooms are at least a month away for us. Maybe. It just depends.
Yeah.
Michigan is finicky.
Well, you're in that upper part too, which is really
Yeah.
touchy. Yeah,
Yeah,
real
we just
short
had
seasons.
major ice storm. We just had major ice storms. We thankfully didn't get hit, but yeah, we still have snow.
Oh,
Wow.
goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So what have you been up to, Rachel? I mean, anything that new this week on your homestead?
Oh, this week on the homestead, I have been trying not to get overly excited and lowering my excitement about what's going to happen because right now we just have sand everywhere and I'm moving from one homestead to another. And my old homestead we were at for 18 years and it had beautiful soil and now I have sand and clay and I haven't had any time to amend it. So I was telling Harold before we came on that I'm lowering my standards and realizing that if I want to plant anything, it's probably going to be in the orchard where we have spent a lot of time. And so yeah, that's been on the thought process of where I'm going to plant things. And I have sea buckthorn that I want to figure out where I'm going to plant. Yeah, I
You have
started
to plant that
those.
with caution because of the thorns and where you want it. You want that in the right place because it can
Yeah.
be a little bit invasive and yeah.
Yeah. So I want it somewhere I can control it, but also somewhere that it will thrive. And yeah, so that's not a lot. We've just been trying to get the other homestead sold and trying to feed ourselves while we're working and working on two homesteads. That's
Yeah.
been our
Yeah.
big thing. Just eat decent food.
Well, you moved all them canning jars, so you might as well use them up, huh?
Oh man, that was a task.
Yeah, you had a lot. Well, here we had we had this really nice spell of weather coming through. It was like mid and even upper 70s, and it was really nice. And I was getting excited about doing some mushroom hunting, but then it just dropped. And then we had like tornadoes coming through last night, like literally like 30 miles away from our house. We had some tornadoes touch down here, so it was really bad storm came through last night. And then as soon as it's supposed to rain for like the next 4 days, I think 5 days, and then the temperatures just drop, and we're going to get down to the low 20s for a few days. So
Ooh.
it's just kind of like killing my plans for the garden right now. And I have already direct sowed some things, but I'm going to probably, if those start popping, I'm going to probably have to cover those up those nights when it drops down that low. 'Cause that's a pretty solid freeze. I mean, I could definitely take some things
Yeah.
out.
Especially
But
for just pop babies, they're still so
yeah, they're
tender
going
at
to be
that part.
delicate.
Like, yeah.
But that is the great thing about direct sowing versus transplanting. It's just they adapt as they grow, and you just don't have that shock.
True.
Like if you tried to transplant something and do that and that hit, they'd all be dead for sure. But there's just a resilience that happens when it grows from seed outside that you just don't have in a transplant. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I agree. My goal is to direct sow as much as possible. Just with our short seed, the only things I have to seed start have been the peppers and the tomatoes. Otherwise, it
Yeah.
just like I have some that will volunteer, but by the time our frost hits, they're just getting like their first blossom. So
Yes.
there's no harvest. But I'm with you. Like anything else, I just direct sow it all.
I do transplant a lot of things that I want to try to get to harvest, like say broccoli, cauliflower, things like that. Yeah, they would do great if I just direct sowed them, but at the same time, I can get another whole nother crop in if I transplant those and get a little bit of boost on them each time and get more harvest. And on a small homestead like mine, I have to do that really as much as
Yeah, the
possible.
succession planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's a busy time of the year. Everybody's got a lot going
Mhm.
on, but um, I have said many times, hundreds of times on this podcast over the years, that there is one skill that I believe is probably the number one skill on a homestead, and yet the most underrated skill on a homestead, and that is cooking from scratch. I think it is
Mm.
the most underrated skill that there is for homesteaders. Everybody focuses on the garden and the livestock and all the things, but what takes place in that kitchen to me is the most underrated and probably most important thing, and something that you can do literally anywhere.
Yeah, amen. I am in complete agreement with you.
Mhm.
I mean, really, and there's a reason, like, the kitchen is the heart of the home.
Mhm.
Um, and so many folks, yes. And I also will say too, like, if you don't have your foundations in place for cooking from scratch and having your kitchen be efficient and your skill sets efficient in the kitchen, then when you add on the garden and the livestock and the preserving, and especially when all of that tends to really, accumulate in summer, and if you're trying to preserve all of that wonderful food that's coming in and take advantage of the fresh, produce and bounty, that's when things kind of really like explode, or you just end up being overwhelmed and like a lot of stuff ends up going to waste.
Hmm.
It's kind of, I have to laugh because almost anybody who's done very much canning, I will say, can all relate to where it's like, I just spent all day canning loads and loads of food. So
Yeah.
we have all this wonderful stuff to eat in the wintertime. And I'm going and ordering like a Domino's pizza because I'm exhausted from putting up
Well,
all this food, right? And like every canner's been there,
yeah.
and like, and every now and then, like, there is no shame in that, right? But it's kind of funny because you could see that happen. The problem is when that becomes the norm, right?
Hmm.
Or at
Yes.
least for me, like, I don't want that to be my normal. Every now and then I kind of, 80-20 rule is kind of how I operate. Like 80% of the time I want to be doing the things that I know are good for my family and our budget and our health and all of that. And then the other 20%, we'll play with that. But yeah, I agree with you a whole
That's
100%.
it. I was exactly where I was wanting to take this conversation, because that
Yeah.
is the issue, isn't it? Because we work so hard to grow this food and prepare this food and preserve this food, and then it's so easy to just not have time because we stay so busy. When the time comes to actually cook them something from scratch from what we have, and say, "Oh, I just I don't really have time to mess with that now," and then we end up taking these shortcuts and eating out or microwaving something or something like that, and it's like, I guess I wanted to ask you about that. Is like, do you have some tips for
Yeah.
preparing or staying prepared or prepping ahead of time that could make it to where we don't give in like that, and we can actually eat more from our storage ahead of time, and cook from scratch?
Yeah, I do. And it's really funny. I feel like a lot of times the solution that can be presented to this is meal plan. And
Mm.
in one sense, that's right. Like when we plan for things, right? It's kind of like an ounce of
Mhm.
prevention. Well, an ounce of planning it really can pay off in all endeavors, but especially in the kitchen. However, I have tried my dangest to be one of the meal planners that you have like a month's worth of dinners planned out, and like there's this perfect binder or whatever of all of your meals, and then your ingredient list if you don't have it from your own pantry or garden. And I got to be honest, like, I don't think I'm ever going to grow up to a point where that's what I do.
Mm.
It's never been
Amen.
something I can stick to. I mean, and some people that works phenomenal for them. And
Yes.
so, in recognition that if that is the way your brain works and that
Uh-huh.
works for you, like, amen, sis, brother, keep doing that. It
Right.
doesn't work for me. Like, it ends up
Yeah.
driving me crazy, and it causes me more stress than it does anything
Me
else.
Yeah.
too. Me too. I'm
So
glad to
I've
hear you say that.
Yes, you're not alone. But I feel like there may be more of us who feel that way. I don't know. Or maybe it's just what you
Yeah.
attract because that's the way you roll. So for me, what I've found is if I have an idea of at least like even just that night and the following day, ideally like about 3 days, I'll kind of
Mhm.
know what we're gonna do. And then I can look at where I've got space in my schedule, and I can kind of plug that in, and like fully embracing. Here's where the modern part of homesteading. I love, Harold, that is the name of the podcast. Here's where the modern aspect comes in. Instapots and slow cookers can be your best friend. Now, I
Yeah.
am a canning girl. I mean, I love my pressure canner. Mason jars are my love language, but
Mhm.
having an Instapot can be really great, especially if you didn't remember to take out meat to thaw
Mhm.
ahead of time.
Yes.
Yes.
And so that Instapot has saved me so many times, by like, ooh, I didn't remember to thaw the hamburger. I didn't remember to thaw the chicken, or, whatever it is, and you can still have it in a relatively quick period of time, fully cooked, nice and tender, juicy, all those things we like. And there. So, what I found for me is if I just kind of know ahead of time for dinners, um, then that will allow me to be like, oh, I know I need to take out XYZ. And make sure if there's a thawing need, or if we do need to grab an ingredient from the store, really having a well-stocked pantry really helps to eliminate, oh, I can't make this unless I go to the store. And
Mm.
Yeah.
learning how to cook, from the basics. So stocking a bunch of spices, like, if you don't know how to make tacos, for example, without a packet of taco seasoning, then that's really going to inhibit you if you're out of taco seasoning or a chili seasoning
Mhm.
packet from being able to make the thing, even if you do have the meat or if you're doing like a, a bean variety. I know like chili fanatics don't come at me for saying beans and chili. um, but if you,
Macaroni is the bigger difference. People, there's a war going on about the whole macaroni or noodles and pasta in Chile.
oh, really? Okay. I have not been part of
Oh,
that one yet.
I did
This is
not know
funny.
that.
Me neither. Okay, you're informing us, Harold. But I mean, really like learning that, and if you just stock those basic spices, one, it's
Mhm.
way cheaper. You don't have the fillers, but it actually
Yeah.
does give you an incredible amount of freedom in the different things that you can make just by having those spices on hand instead of the individual packets. So for me, what I found is if I can batch ahead um our breakfast, so what I like to do is I will either do like a big thing of muffins, or a lot of times if we're doing protein heavy, which I know if you have chickens, you are flush on eggs in the spring. If not right now, I know they're more expensive at the grocery store. I will just encourage you with looking at chickens. But I'll take like a dozen chicken eggs or duck eggs. We have both. A little bit of cottage cheese and some protein. And I just will whip that all up and just line muffin tins, whatever odd and end vegetables you've got in there, you want to put in there, some cheese, some herbs. Like you can just, really vary it up. There's really no recipe per se. And bake it at 350 degrees for about 25 minutes just until everything's kind of set, and then pop them out. And then super easy to either eat cold, you can heat them up really fast, but it's protein, and then breakfast is done for the week. So then you
Yeah.
don't even have to think about it, right? It's done, and it's really just, it's a really relatively quick thing to do. Like I said, you could do the same thing with whatever it is you want for breakfast. I know sometimes
Mhm.
people will vary it, or even just doing a bunch of hard boiled eggs. Those are a
Mhm.
fast snack. They're a great breakfast. You can add them to salads to take extra protein. Maybe if you have leftovers, not enough for a full meal, to make salad. So the other thing, or just deviled eggs. I love deviled eggs. So I'll usually just do that where I'll cook up a dozen hard boiled eggs in the Instapot, 7 minutes for duck eggs. They come out perfect, and even farm fresh will end up peeling nicely with the Instapot I've found. And then I'll just do like I said, like usually the thing of eggs or a thing of muffins, depending on if we're wanting more protein or carbs for the week. And then that way I don't ever have to even think about breakfast or really snacks for that whole week. So I'm a big fan of doing that. And then I really like to on Sunday nights, and ideally it's whatever day of the week. Most of the time we kind of have somewhat set schedules. So for us, typically, I know Sunday afternoon, we try to not plan things or big things. That's kind of like reset, getting things ready for the week, etc. And so typically I will cook a whole thing of meat. So like a whole chicken or a roast with a bone in, something like that, that's going to take a little bit longer usually to cooking time, but then I've got my time to prep. So like while I'm doing my batching the eggs or those different things, I'll cook that whole thing of meat and then make some sides. And typically what I do is if we're doing any type of bread for a side, like if we're doing biscuits, or if I know I want to make maybe like pot pie with the leftovers later in the week, I'll go ahead and do all of that on Sunday. So I just kind of take like this 2 hour time frame where I'm just batching things for the rest
Mhm.
of the week, not necessarily like
Mhm.
making like 10 different freezer meals that are going to go in a Ziploc
Right.
bag and go in the freezer, or casseroles, but really just setting myself up. And then we'll have the roast chicken, for example, like that night for dinner with some different sides. And then I will usually double if I'm doing the biscuits or if I'm doing rolls, whatever it is I will double it up and I'll cook fresh what we're going to have that night for dinner. And then the rest I'll either bake and freeze, or sometimes like for biscuits, I found you can just freeze the biscuit dough raw, just, cut
Mhm.
it out, flash freeze it. And then you can bake those from frozen, add like 2 minutes bake time on. And you'd never know that the dough had been frozen. Like they do perfect. I found with things that have yeast, that I do prefer to bake those rolls and then freeze them
Okay.
after they've already been baked. And then you can just take them out, thaw them, and warm them up in the oven, and they taste really great too. You can freeze yeasted dough. I just have found that it usually doesn't have quite the same oomph when you thaw it and then go to bake it again. And you can't bake it from frozen. So one has to remember to thaw things. Not my forte. So I'm setting myself up for success. If I can bake it from frozen, great, we're going to freeze it. If it's something that actually needs to continue rising to have good texture, then I'm just going to bake it and then freeze it. So after doing that for a few weeks, I kind of get ahead with having some of those sides already in the freezer. So then on those super busy nights, it's providing myself with homemade convenience foods, because there's a reason
Yes.
convenience foods rose. I mean, like,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
reason that they are billion-dollar industries and
Mhm.
people reach for them because we
Mhm.
are busy. And so for me, I'm like, instead of, I want to embrace what my reality is. And yes, like, let's put in effort to make changes where we feel we need to make changes. But let's also be very cognizant of where we really are and how much we can change and do. And so I just know I'm not in a position right now to every single day freshly cook breakfast, lunch, dinner, and all snacks from scratch 7 days out of the week. Now I can batch things ahead, like I've shared, where we pretty
Mhm.
much are still eating everything homemade and from scratch. But I'm doing so in a way where I'm preparing my own convenience foods ahead of time in order to be able to do that. So sometimes it's just a little bit of shifting and
Mhm.
looking at, like, how have they done these convenience foods and with the horrible ingredients and all of the other things that it brings, but, like, how can I emulate that from a holistic standpoint for myself? And I mean, we're talking about in the kitchen, but really, like, I try to take that
Yeah.
viewpoint for everything
Yeah.
in life.
So when you say that, so are you talking about using your sourdough recipes that you're taking out of the freezer, frozen, and then baking?
Well,
And
so
that works better than
it
your
really
yeast one?
depends. You can do it
Okay.
both. You can do it both ways. So you can definitely do it with sourdough,
Okay.
um, and or regular, you know, instant yeast, or
Okay.
the different variations that we have of yeast. But like, it's in the packets or the jars or the bags for buying it in bulk. Yeah. So I found, so like, for just like further clarification, so things for like cookies, right? There is no yeast
Right.
obviously
Yeah.
in cookies, or biscuits is something we don't have yeast
Mhm.
in. Tortillas we don't have yeast in, like those types of things. Crackers, or for example, so I've found crackers are so just fast anyways, there would be no like, just bake them, like you're rolling it out and baking it anyways. But for like cookies
Yeah.
and biscuits, waffles, pancakes, those types of things, I found for me is, um I do like for waffles is I just make up a big batch on the weekend and then flash freeze them individually. And
Mhm.
then during the week, whoever wants a waffle, pull it out frozen from the freezer, put it in the toaster oven, and then it just will thaw in like a minute. And then if you, most people don't want their waffle toasted. So then it's just thawed, and then you can just throw your syrup on and like you're good to go and eat it, or whatever your topping would be. But for like biscuits, I have found them, and pie crust, I prefer to make that and then freeze it raw and then just bake it from frozen. So with
Okay.
Mm.
with pie crust, if you roll it out at the bottom crust, so predominantly for things like, quiches or those types of things, if you roll out the bottom crust and put it in whatever pie plate you'd normally be baking it in, and then just put it in the freezer and let it flash freeze, then you can just pop it out once it's frozen and just slide it in like a big gallon Ziploc bag in its frozen state. And then when you want to bake it, you take it out frozen, it's already formed to the pie plate, and you just put it back in that pie plate, and then you just cook, put your filling in or whatever, if it's pie or like a quiche or something like that. And then you just bake it from frozen and just add on, like, usually just like a couple of, maybe like 2 minutes. I mean, pie crust is so thin, it really doesn't affect bake
Yeah.
time very
Yeah.
much. And then same thing with like biscuits and cookie dough. It's usually same temperature. And cookie dough, I will freeze in a log because I find that way faster than trying to flash freeze individual like drops of chocolate
Yeah.
chip cookies. I just freeze it in a log. And then while the oven's preheating, I pull it out, and it thaws just enough with a sharp knife that you can just cut it in slices from that log, throw them on your cookie sheet. Increase baking time by like 2 minutes is usually all it is. And then you've got your cookies are fresh. So that's typically what I do. If it's sourdough, or a yeast type dough, I prefer to just make it regularly and
Okay.
bake it and then let it cool and then freeze it. I just find the texture is better. But I also
Yeah.
do, speaking of like sourdough yeasts, I like to do what I call master doughs. And that's where you can do it with sourdough, and you can also just do it with yeast. And I make up a large batch of dough, and you let it go through its first rise or its bulk ferment
Mhm.
at room temperature. If bulk ferment, if we're talking sourdough, if we're just talking regular yeast, then you're just going to let it rise for about 2 hours at room temperature. And then you put it in the fridge. And then you just pull out sections of the dough for the yeast. About 14 days is how long it'll last in the fridge, and you'll still get a rise when you go to bake it. The sourdough's not quite as long. It's usually about 5 to 7 days to get like ultimate rise height when you go to
Mhm.
bake it. But it's a great way, especially if you're like, well, I know I'm going to want to make something with sourdough or with something with bread, but I don't know what. Like maybe I want a loaf of bread one day and then we might want dinner rolls, or I might want hamburger rolls, or maybe I want cinnamon rolls or pizza crust, like it's pizza dough that will turn into crust. So typically I will also do up those, especially if I'm like, it's not a biscuit week. And those can be phenomenal, and they work equally well with yeast and or doing sourdough. And I do love sourdough because, of course, you get all of the wonderfulness of sourdough from, the nutrients and better digestion and lower glycemic index, like all of the beautiful things that sourdough
Mhm.
provides. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I love the idea of prepping ahead of time and getting this done because like I said, well, I have two thoughts. First of all, I should have ate before this started because now I'm really hungry. And two, um, I love that you get into the health aspect of it as well because all three of us really, I wouldn't say started homesteading because of it, but definitely took homesteading to another level because of health. I
Mhm.
know when I had you on the first time, you talked about how you had some issues and it was really about changing your diet to get there. And so I think the cooking from scratch and cooking it healthy and eating in a better way
Yeah.
like that, I mean, that's what it's all about to really increase your health because most of the problems I think we have as a society probably stem from unhealthy eating. I mean, it's definitely been my case. I know Rachel, you've had the same experience, and Melissa, from what I've heard you
Mhm.
say, it's the same as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. And even like I also firmly believe that we would still have some problems even if we are eating perfectly healthy, right? Like, so to be
Oh,
fair,
yeah,
like
yeah,
you
Yeah.
could be eating extremely healthy and still have health problems.
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
But but I firmly believe that any health problem that you will or will not have is exasperated by not eating healthy. I mean,
Yeah.
like it will infinitely make it worse.
yeah,
And so all of the things that we're doing, even if we still have health problems, I can pretty much one of the few things I would say I would guarantee that by eating healthy, they're not as bad as they would be if you weren't.
yeah. I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it made all the difference in my life, of course, changing my diet up and making more things from
Same.
scratch and eating way. It's just it's strange that we've gotten so far away from that. You know, I've heard you say many times you're was a fifth generation homesteader, so you probably grew up eating that way. I didn't though. It was
Yeah,
way
I didn't
different,
either.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, I appreciate the fact that you're sharing this wisdom that you grew up even, and I know you even had to learn a lot of things yourself that you probably didn't do. But yeah, you're sharing a lot of that with folks and helping people eat better and live a healthier life. So I'll tell you, I was looking through the review copy of the book that I got from you, and I've seen some really good recipes in there. And I was really bread is like the thing I love bread. I'm a keto guy though. In the past I take my breaks and do keto occasionally, but I love bread. It's probably the hardest thing I can do away with. And you had some great bread recipes in there. But I also say it's one of the things I struggle to keep up with making homemade bread because especially with sourdough, it's just like I'll do sourdough for a couple months and then I get tired of the upkeep and I'm like, okay, let's go back to regular bread. But you look like you had some really great simple recipes in there. And I got one from the first book that I bought of yours, which was the Made from Scratch Life, and you had like a honey, I forget what it's called, a honey wheat whole wheat
Yeah.
bread in there, and that one was fantastic. But then I seen you had a really simple one in this new book. Can you tell me a little bit about that? It seemed like you used that same recipe on a few of the other recipes. You took that simple bread recipe and then used it in a
Yes.
couple places.
Yeah. And so that's like what I call a master dough, like for multiple reasons,
Yeah,
because I think too, like there's so many things that we can do in the kitchen. And I almost feel like the one of the enemies of homesteading is there's so many possibilities and facets to homesteading. Like there's so
Mhm.
many things
Yeah.
that we can do and we want to do it all. Like once you start down, you're like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that, I want to do that. But that can sometimes be a detriment because then we can't really focus on one thing. So even in the kitchen, is if you can really learn how to master one dough, because yes, you're following a recipe when it comes to bread making, but truthfully, like the temperature of your home affects how fast that dough rises or doesn't
Mhm.
rise. It's there's the humidity of the day, and that changes, right? Can affect at your hydration level, meaning how much water to flour do you actually need to put in. And so, even though you can follow the exact same recipe, even with a scale, there could be different factors in your home that change day to day, season to season, that can affect the end product. And some of it's fairly minimal, and sometimes, it can be a lot. So if you're working on this same bread recipe, quickly you're going to realize this is how this dough feels and looks that gives me the loaf that I want. So you can learn how to
Mhm.
actually read the dough. And so if you're trying like 50 different recipes all the time, it's
Yeah.
really hard for you to master what that specific dough is supposed to look and to feel like to give you the end result bread that you want and the way your family likes it as far as texture, all those different things. And
Mhm.
so I really like for beginner bakers, especially with bread, to have a dough recipe that they can get really comfortable with, but also not get bored with. So not making the exact same loaf over and over and over again. And that's where this master dough comes in, because you can make a great, delicious tasting basic bread out of it. But you can also take that same dough and then you can turn it into cinnamon rolls. You can turn it into dinner rolls, and you can add a little bit of herbs in there for a total, to take that flavor profile somewhere different. But it allows you to really master that dough, and then that dough, I call it master dough because it can be created into so many different things.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
like it's a play on words, right? It goes both ways. And
Yeah.
so I really like it for that aspect. And for a lot of people, we also do have the sourdough, because speaking to health things, right? A lot of times it's really interesting. I've done keto, I've done carnivore, so I'm very familiar with tracking macros and looking at your carbs and your net carbs and all fun or not fun things depending on your frame of mind.
Yeah, not fun.
Sometimes it's fun and sometimes you're like, oh. But what's interesting too is the more I have found for me personally, the further I get in my gut healing journey, the less inflammation I have and the better my system is able to tolerate carbs. And so
Mhm.
then I'm able to bring back in more of the breads, and not have those inflammation reactions, or the different reactions and stuff to them. And so I think it's a testament to so many of us that's affected by our food and our environment
Mhm.
have more inflammation and issues with our gut than we realize. And
Yeah.
just by switching to cooking from scratch, you can still have some of those issues, and because it's a healing process.
Yeah.
But it does tend to reduce for most people, like their inflammation and stuff, so that you get to a point where you're able to bring back in those breads on a more
Yeah.
routine basis. And some people choose to do carb cycling, or they'll do keto and then come off
Yeah. That's what I
and all of
do.
those
Yeah.
different things. Yeah. So if you're at a point where you can bring bread, or you're like, okay, I want to get away from a lot of the store-bought bread that has the dough conditioners and just all the different things that make it even more intolerable to most people's systems, doing sourdough is great. And to your point, Harold, like sourdough can be great, especially if you're doing like a sourdough master dough, or sourdough is so resilient, your starter. Like you can get it and be like, okay, I'm going to do sourdough for a little bit. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to put it in the fridge because I'm done for a while.
Mhm.
And then just
Yeah.
take it out. Take it out when you're ready to deal with it again, which usually
Yeah.
most of summer, my sourdough starter just sits in the fridge. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not doing a ton of bacon in the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I experienced that same thing. It's like I just had we were talking about me and Rachel were talking about that earlier about how sourdough will be on the docket for a while and we'll really be all about it. And then it's like, okay, I'm done. And then kombucha might be on and we'll do some of that for a while. And it's like, okay, I'm done with that now. I don't want to do that anymore. And we just go through these phases like that, where you just bring things in and out because it just gets, the routine's nice. And some people are just so good about continuing a routine even for years. And I'm not that guy though. Like, it's like I do something for a
Yeah.
couple of months and I'm like, I need a break. I got to do something else you know. But yeah, sourdough is great. I love it, and I wish I could do it. I'm always looking for that person who's got it figured out to where it's just easy. And it is easy. It isn't that hard. It's just every day there's just this work, that you have to do something, and it don't take very long, but it is something you have to do. And I guess I wish there was there is, I've seen people do it in ways that seems easier, but then I've always, I forget to do it their way. And I should try it because I love sourdough, and I think the health benefits are so worth jumping into it. Um, your new book that that's coming out now. This is a rewrite of an old book that you just added a bunch to, right?
Yeah, it is. So the original book Handmade came out, I believe, in 2016. I was actually trying to remember
Okay.
dates back because from when you write it to when it actually releases to the public
Hmm.
is vastly different. I'm like, I think it released in 2016. And so when it released back then, I really wanted it to be more of I guess we could call kind of like a standard cookbook that has, photos in it, and was more that type of a book. And at the time, that just didn't work out with the publishing house. And so they came back to me and they're like, we would like to redo this. And I'm like, I only want to redo it if we can actually have photos in there. Cause I'm a visual learner personally. And
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I really like having photos in there on things. I just find that super helpful. And so
Mhm.
it was really fun because I did get to rewrite it. So of course, a lot of things are so foundational with homesteading. It's not like things really change that much, especially in, like a 9-year span. Um, so it was fun to see how much of that book is still the same recipes and the same things that I do. But then
Hmm.
there was areas where I'm like, oh my goodness, like I didn't realize how much I've refined this, or, I've made this better, or I've made this easier, how much more I've learned about this and since then, and then get to pour all of that back into it. So we added over 20 new recipes, got to expand some different areas, got to add in a little bit more preserving, got to add in more on the medicinal side, actually on
Hmm.
herbs and natural
Okay.
remedies, and expand the cooking part. So I feel like it is a reissue. It's a new book and a reissue in a way, but I'm
Yeah,
like, this was the book it was always supposed to be. So
yeah,
I think I'm more excited actually about the reissue of it than I was the original, because I'm like,
yeah.
yes, like this is the version I want you to have that I think is going to serve you the best.
Okay.
Well, I always recommend your books because you have some great ones. I love your one on preserving. What's that one called? The
Thank
everything.
you. Everything worth preserve. Yes,
Worth Preserving. That's a
that will
great book.
title right behind me.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I
Okay.
see it. Yeah.
There's like when it comes to preserving, I recommend two books all the time, and one's the Ball
Mm.
book. I was in your book. I just think they're the two
Oh,
good. Those two
thank
books go so
you.
well in a kitchen to help you to do it right. And I just love that you wrote that book. It's a really good one. Also, the one you did on uh, the garden planner is a fantastic book. I love that one as well for just
Yeah.
knowing how much to plant and that to feed your family. I think that's it's a great resource for that. But this one looks like it has a lot of promise because like I said before, cooking is just an underrated skill. And to have these recipes at your hand, ready to go anytime. I mean, some of them are just so simple, like the cracker recipe you mentioned earlier. It's so easy to make crackers, but how many of us do it? And how much how much healthier is it to make our own crackers than buy the ones in the store? And
Yeah.
it's so simple, and that's in there, and you can make that. And so I just love that you included these. Some are definitely more complex, and you know make your mouth water a little bit looking at them. And some of them are really simple that just replace these everyday things that we don't think about that we can make from home, make from scratch, that are just they're way better for us in the long run. So I love that you're including all that kind of stuff. I love the medicinal stuff. You have some just household item cleaners, things like that. I think are in this book as well. I know the made from scratch book, it's in there.
Yeah.
You have a lot of recipes like that you include. And so I think it's important, if we just not always be thinking about just the garden and just the livestock and just the things like that, but bring it in and make homesteading, in the home as well. It's a big part of it.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny that you say that because I was having this conversation yesterday and about like condensed creams, cans of soup. Like when I was
Oh,
growing up,
yeah.
my mom, she cooked
Yeah.
a lot from scratch. I mean, like I didn't even have Oreos until I was a teenager. Like, I mean, I didn't have store-bought cookies. Like my mom made like a lot from scratch. But interestingly enough, when she would make casseroles, it was the can of condensed, cream. I feel like, born in 81. And so child of the late 80s
Right.
and
Right.
90s, like
Yeah.
every cookbook and their brother had, this can of condensed soup with it. Anyways,
Hmm.
or maybe just where I was at. So,
Oh no, here too.
and
No, it
so,
was here too.
but, I didn't even know that you could make some of those things at home. I mean,
Yeah.
even growing up, like we raised our own beef and had a garden, all those things. There were certain things like that that I always saw my mom purchase. I didn't see her make them from scratch, even though she always made gravy from scratch. Like there were no packets of gravy mixed. Amen. However, that was one thing she always bought from the store. And so that was what was modeled for me. And so I remember when I was first, the health part that I shared with you, and that's when I was really cutting out a lot of things. And so my rule back then, and still to this day, was I cut out anything that was highly GMO, that had a lot of, soy proteins, or just a lot of those different things. And condensed soup
Hmm.
definitely meets those. And I'm like, okay, then I've got to figure out a replacement for some of these
Right.
recipes that I've got that we love. And I'm trying to remember if this was online at the time. I think we had the internet then, or if I found like some old cookbooks. I really don't quite recall. But I was like, I'm just gonna make a roux and
Yep.
basically a simple white sauce. And
Hmm.
my goodness, it literally takes like 4 minutes, and it's
Mm.
basic ingredients, and it tastes so much better. It holds up to the slow cooker, to the oven, like all the things. And I'm like, it's actually faster than going to the store and buying a can. I mean, and way cheaper and way
Yeah.
healthier. And I'm like, how do we not know this? I mean, I didn't know it
Hmm.
either. So I'm like, but I'm just like, so many things in the kitchen. We don't realize, and I know it sounds silly, but like, we don't even realize, because that's just been our norm, that you can make it from scratch. And the marketing on our food system has been phenomenally and amazing. So like, if you actually were to study marketing, you're like, probably the best marketing job ever has been on processed foods,
Right.
because we automatically think that homemade is harder and more time consuming, and that our time is better spent doing something else. I'm not, so
Hmm.
there's like three lies in one. Um, so to that point, like, you can make any homemade condensed cream of whatever soup, 4 minutes flat, all natural, healthy, good ingredients, super cheap. And it actually tastes better because you can use real butter, and you can use bone broth. If you want to use
Yeah.
dairy, you can use dairy. I mean, like, anyhow,
Oh,
I will
and you
get
could
off my
add in those
soapbox,
morel
but
mushrooms that you're gonna
yes,
find this weekend.
yes. I mean, and it's so fast. I mean, literally, I've timed it, 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the first experience I had with something like that is I remember being, just because you're so used to having store bought stuff in the house, right? And I remember having the kids here, and everybody wanted pancakes, and we didn't have just a little bit of pancake batter. I'm like, oh no, I don't have any pancake batter. And then I was like, wait a minute. How do you make pancake batter? So I'm like looking it up, and I'm like, we have all this stuff. We can just make the pancake batter, we can
Yes.
make
Yeah.
pancakes. And then, it wasn't that hard. It was very, very simple. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing what you can just make at home like that with what you have.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, even like homemade quote unquote junk food, some French fries and ketchup, homemade, you will never want to go to McDonald's or Burger King again. I
No.
mean, and then to top that off, if you pull those potatoes right out of your garden and those tomatoes out of your garden, man, that's some good
Cook,
stuff right
cook
there.
them in tallow. Yeah, it just makes all the
Oh,
difference,
That's what I
doesn't it?
usually do. Tallow, lard
Yeah.
tallow. Yep.
yes. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm hungry because it's lunchtime my time.
Well, I'm not going to let you get out here to go eat yet, because I got a few more questions for you. I do want to
Mhm.
just highlight some of the before we. I mean, again, I want to talk about your book and give you a chance to send people to where to find out in the end. But you got so much going on. I just got to ask you these other
Yeah.
questions. This right here, the Homestead Living magazine. That's something that you're really involved with, and it's doing great, and I love it. And I just wanted to highlight that. I want to talk about that for a second, about what the inspiration was behind that, and just how that's going, and what it's. I mean, how just anything that you want to tell us about that. I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm so happy that you have it and you like it. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I love it. I've been
Yeah.
getting it since the very beginning.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. So it's really funny. So Homestead Living, which we have the monthly print magazine, and also publish different homestead books, material, really is, I feel like this is probably everything in my life where I have a frustration point, and if I can't find a solution for it, I tend to be like, then I want to create the solution.
There you go.
Um, so I was at a point where, as an author, so as authors with traditional publishing houses, it's a very interesting industry. And unless you've been in it, you probably, why would you know? But authors really don't make very much on their books. I mean, like, per copy sold. Now, of course, there's variances in here, and I mean between the deal that you get and the house and like all that thing. So I'm in generalities here, but in
Right.
general, and unless it's like a runaway book where there's volume amount sold, and so therefore they're making more just because there's this huge amount of this book being sold. I mean, authors make a very, very small amount. I mean, sometimes less than $1 per copy sold actually the author gets. So
Mhm.
you're really not making a lot. So most of the time people are not writing books in order to get rich or to make a lot of money on. It's more they're passionate about it. They know the information is going to help people. They want to get it out into the world. And that's kind of the reason that they're doing it. And so with that, I mean, that was, I've always wanted to be a published author, but that was my reason. It wasn't because I was um making a vast amount of money on putting books out there,
Right.
but it was also to the point where, and nowadays, which, and I also completely understand, so it's not that publishing houses, like, I don't want to paint things in a bad light that shouldn't be painted in a bad light, but there's so much involved with putting out a book. I mean, that you wouldn't expect even expense wise. And then you have the marketing of it. And now we
Yes.
don't really have our brick and mortar bookstores anymore. I mean, not like we used to. I don't have any
Right.
in my area really. You know, Amazon is this behemoth when it comes to putting books out. And so a lot of the publishing houses, which is making sound business decisions, I'm not faulting them because we do need to be good stewards of businesses that we have, whatever we have, but including our businesses. And so now, unless you have usually a decent or large online platform, especially if you're writing nonfiction, it's almost impossible to get a book deal because the publishing house is like, well, gosh, we know that we need the author to help move their book. And so if I'm looking at someone that has, an Instagram following of like 200,000 versus somebody who doesn't even have Instagram, I mean, it's pretty obvious like why you would choose that.
Yeah.
But the problem with that, especially within the homesteading niche, is we have got people who have been practicing their craft of homesteading or their specific area of homesteading, for decades. I mean, they are a
Mhm.
true master at that aspect, but because they haven't been practicing the art of social media marketing necessarily, they don't have this huge following. And
Yeah.
so I was like, I would love to be able to have one that it's a company that it's all like vetted, true homestead as much as we can, people who have been doing this for a long time and are, I'm saying quote unquote expert because I'm like, at what level are you technically an expert? Like it's kind of
Yeah.
arbitrary, right? But are very experienced in their areas because that's who I want to learn from.
Yes.
And in this day and age, sometimes it can, like, if you don't know what you don't know, how do you know if what someone's sharing with you is actually coming from experience? I mean, I would
That's such
love
a
to think
valid
that
point.
most people
Yeah.
do, but not all. Like, not everybody is
Right.
ethical, sadly.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
was like, how do we create a resource too where you can go to, because there's a lot of different publications that are like really great gardening magazines, really great livestock magazines, really great herbal magazines, like um but where it's truly homesteading in one publication, and I wasn't seeing that at the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and so I had a business partner who was like, he had publishing experience where I just had the author and homesteading experience. And he was like, I don't see anything out there. And I'm like, me neither. And he's like, do you want to do this together? And I'm like, oh, hmm. And so then it took a little convincing, and I'm like, yes. And so it's just been so awesome to see it grow, that other people want that too, but get to the point where we can find people that have this incredible knowledge base, maybe don't have this huge following, and we can be like, this needs to get out to the world, and to be at a point where we can help to do that. So that's been
Right.
really, really fun. I mean, and every month, like, I'm so excited when my copy comes. Like, I mean, it sounds kind of funny because, like, and we have an editorial team, so it is not just me. We have
Yeah.
a fabulous team, and that too has been really fun to be like, wow, like, we actually get to employ people, provide people with jobs creating this really awesome and amazing thing. Like, it's actually very humbling and really cool at the same time. So I will get the magazine and go through it and just be like so excited, like woohoo. So anyways, I'm glad that you're enjoying it too.
Well, I like, because there's always somebody, what's funny to me is I'm reading these articles, and a lot of these people I've had on the podcast, at
Yes.
different times and stuff. So it's always exciting to me to see them in there and read their stories and what they're doing. And I just love that, so, and a lot, like you said, these aren't people that have always, a lot of these people aren't people that are so online present. They're really just homesteaders or farmers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's why you want to learn from them, because
Yeah.
that's what they've put their focus into. That's what they've put their work into. But yet they just don't have the capability of getting it out there, that information, that knowledge out there. This magazine really does give them a platform for that. And I do love that. It's really, really good. And I just look forward to getting it every month. And it's just, anytime I can, when my little bit of spare time I do have, when I can kick back and read a couple articles, I think it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it. But that also brings me to the other thing, and that's this pretty awesome conference you're putting on. And I feel like it's kind of the same reason too, maybe. Behind that.
Yeah, it is. And I have a partner in that too. So know that nobody thinks I'm like actually doing this all by myself, because
Yeah.
I'd like to think that I can do a lot of things, but no. And yes, so the Modern Homesteading Conference, which is so funny because it's the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm like, oh, look
Yeah.
at that.
It's a good name. What can I say?
Right. It's excellent. It was really, yes, very similar. So I was going and teaching at a lot of the conferences on the East Coast. So, Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia, and was sharing, with my friends like, hey, if you're gonna, I'm gonna be in this area. If you're gonna come, would like love to see you, get to meet you in person. And so many people were reaching out and were like, is there any on the West Coast? Like, we can't travel that far from our homestead with
Yeah.
flights and time and all the things. And so I'm like, no, but as soon as I see one, like, I will share. Like, as soon as there's one that I see on the West Coast, like, I will let you know. And so this went on for a couple of years. And I'm like, I'm not seeing one on the West Coast. And so my partner and I on the conference, which is Katie Milhorn, she was also working at some of the East Coast conferences. And so because she was flying in from Idaho and I was flying in from Washington, we would try to time our flights together and be like, let's share a rental car, share the expense and meet up and have somebody to travel with. And so we did that, and we were in the rental car and we were driving, and I'm like, have you ever thought about putting one on in the West Coast? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, me too. I said, would you want to do it with me? Because there's no way I can do it by myself. But like, we really need one there. And so it's really funny because I was driving and she was writing down. And so we're like, okay, if we were to do this, like this would be like our dream people that we could have taught, like, kind of just like brainstorming and like creating like this
Yeah.
dream. So what's really cool is last year, so this year will be our third.
Mhm.
Katie found that notebook and she sent me a picture of it, and she's like, look it, every single one of these speakers that was our dream one,
Wow.
like we've had. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
That's cool.
So it's been really cool. And so many people have said like, oh man, like we never were able to get to the East Coast ones. We're so excited to have one, here. And I think it's just testimony to the homesteading. I feel like is awareness is growing, and I think more
Yeah.
and more people are feeling called to it in one aspect or another.
Mhm.
Um, Even more so when I first got into like the online part of homesteading. I mean,
Yeah.
we were homesteading for a really long time, was back in 2011 actually, and just seeing the want and the desire for that. I mean, it every year it grows more and more and more.
Yeah.
And so just being able
Yeah.
to help more and more people get into it for whatever avenue and area that they're coming from or needing, um, has been really amazing.
Well, I love that you've played your part in really spreading that bug, and really getting it out there, and getting people interested in it, between the podcast and the blog and the books and now conference and magazine and just everything you're involved with. I mean, you're just
Yeah.
doing amazing work there. I just love that you're doing all that. And really, I think you're helping a lot of folks uh, realize the dream. I mean, I think a lot of people think about that, dream about that, and I think a lot of people think it's out of reach. And I think you're doing a lot
Yeah.
to help them understand that you can do this where you're at, even if it just starts in the kitchen. You can do this, and I think that's really important for the people to understand. And you're doing a great job of helping them understand that.
Oh, thanks, Harold. Well, you too. I mean, and I think it's so important that everybody sees that homesteading looks different for everybody.
Mhm.
Everybody's homestead is
Yeah.
gonna look different. But we share like these same foundational cores. And I think it's really important that people see both sides of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, Rachel, did you have any questions you wanted to lay on here before I let her wrap this up?
Oh man, I feel like I'm kind of like overwhelmed just listening to all of it because it's just amazing everything you're doing. And yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think one
I
of the
know a
things.
question that Rachel had. She says, I want to ask her this, and she's already forgotten. She wanted to know about, like, do you grind wheat berries ahead of time
That's what I was
before,
just
and then
gonna
you
say.
grind them when you're fresh?
Do you grind your own grain? And I guess my biggest thing was, do you grind it every time you bake, or are you grinding it ahead of time and storing it in your refrigerator? Because I saw you just recently had a podcast about hand mills and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
and I know that's kind of a big thing that people are really interested in doing. I grind my own grain, but I'm actually celiac, so all mine are gluten-free. So anyways, I just wanted to maybe have you hit on that because I know a lot of people are really
Yeah.
interested in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Grinding grain is so fascinating. So with fresh ground flour, especially with wheat, I've done a little bit of gluten-free breaking. I'm not celiac. I've done some different healing protocols where I have been
Yeah,
gluten-free
yeah.
for periods of time. Yeah. But talking about with wheat, your ancient grains, einkorn,
Mhm.
spelt, and then your hard white and red wheats. Those are predominantly, those four are the ones in the wheat family that I have the most experience with. So for me, when we look at the health benefits of our fresh ground flour, which is a lot of people's reasons for getting into it, not
Mhm.
just the self-sufficiency part.
Right.
Um, as soon as that's ground, it starts to lose its nutrition.
Mhm.
So if you're looking at it and wanting to get the most nutrition out of those, then it's grinding it and using it that day. So
Right.
you can prolong with so that it doesn't go rancid by putting it in the fridge or the freezer, but you still are losing nutrition even though it's slowing down the rancidity
Right.
factor. And so for me, I'm like, it really only takes like, I mean, I guess I should say it depends on how much you're baking in a day. But most of the time, if you're doing like a two bread loaf recipe, max of what, 6 to 7 cups flour usually, if you're doing that much.
Mhm.
That really doesn't take that much time. Like you can literally put your grains in the grinder, have it going while you're getting out your other ingredients. And so I grind fresh, like as needed, to get that maximum nutrition benefits, because I'm like, that's kind of the reason I'm doing it. um
Right.
and it is relatively so fast. I mean, unless like you're, a bakery or something like that where you're doing massive amounts, it's pretty quick. So I grind mine at the time of use personally.
Yeah. I tried to as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
feel like a lacking homesteader over here because I have yet to do my own grain grinding.
You're just not further down that path yet, Harold. You're
Not
not
the bread
lacking.
making.
You're
Like I said,
just not there yet. And that's fine.
I am not yet.
It's okay. I'm not growing my own wheat, so I haven't reached the
there
epitome
we go.
either.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So,
awesome.
and you also, so some of the things that you've also talked about a lot, and I've seen it like in your podcast and stuff, is the herbal type things. Have you gotten a lot into that? I didn't know if you had taken classes, or I know that the certifications aren't, it's so, like you were saying earlier, it's so hard to know what is um
Yeah.
what
Well,
does certification mean and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, and
But
technically with
yeah,
herbalism, which is fascinating, there is no national certification. So it's not
right.
like this is my pharmacy tech license, this is my RN, this is, all the different things. So like, and that can be, you could look at it two ways. Like you could say good or bad. The one part that's good is unfortunately within our Western medical society, and I'm just going to speak from the US because that's where I was from. So I was a pharmacy technician for over 18 years. So in
Okay.
Western medical world. And especially with, the FDA and the USDA, like I'm actually really happy that we don't, because a lot of the
Right.
things when they're first enacted can be for good reasons. I mean, not
Mhm.
always. There's a lot of issues with lobbying us and stuff now allowed that ends up passing laws in our healthcare system. But initially, a lot of things were put in place in order to protect people. However,
Right.
as time goes on, there's weird loopholes that happen, things change, and then unfortunately, a lot of those things that may have been put in place at one point in time for good end up actually becoming bad. And so I'm kind of relieved that honestly that herbs and herbalism has not gotten pulled up under that umbrella, because I think we would see it more harm than good in most cases. However, with herbs, they are natural, but just because something's natural doesn't mean it's always safe. And it doesn't always mean that
Yeah.
it's effective without knowing more about that plant and about that herb and about our bodies and the way that it functions, and all of those different things. So
Mhm.
so there is no certification that you can just go to be like, I am a certified herbalist in the United States of America. Now, there are different herb schools that have programs and you can get a certificate, and it just means that you went through that school's program, right? So people can have certificates, but there is not like a national board certification of herbalists. So just that distinction, because some people will be like, well, so and so said they have a certificate, and I'm like, they absolutely do. That's just,
Right.
but this is what it means. So yes, I have done a lot of herbal training. And funny, as a pharmacy technician for over 18 years, and like with my CEs, there's really very little herbal training that is in our Western society. So even when we had people come in, because there are a lot of pharmaceutical medications that can interact with herbs, or herbs can interact with
Yeah.
them. And so there are instances where, you would ask somebody, or you would say, if you're on, XYZ, make sure you don't take this together. And so what's interesting about that is the data that we would need to pull information from, especially like clinical studies. We would actually have to go to Germany, because the German E-Commission, Germany uses herbs in their medical practice. And so
Mm.
they have a lot of clinical data, and they also have a lot of data that's like over a large population and many years of use. We just don't have that in the US. And
Oh, cool.
so we would actually pay to access their database, because it's just not available in the
Wow.
US. I mean, there's not money, right? Like you can study herbs, but because pharmaceutical
Mhm.
companies aren't prescribing herbs, and neither are doctors, like nobody's going to fund that study. And most of our studies in the US are funded, whether or not
Yes.
we like it, by where money can be made by whatever that study outcome is, or that study
Mhm.
dictates.
Right.
So knowing that, I was very intrigued. I'm like, there's other countries that are using herbs, and there is clinical data clearly that shows there is effectiveness. There's also safety part, like there's dosing and safety and all of this. And so when my daughter, she was diagnosed at about 2.5 years of age with von Willebrand's disease, which is a blood clotting disorder. And so with her diagnosis, she can't take any over the counter um, anti-inflammatories. So no aspirin, no
Okay.
NSAIDs, no Aleve, like nothing. And so with that, Tylenol was really the only thing I could give her for pain or fever if she were to get it. But with personally, for me, Tylenol, I don't even bother. Like it does nothing for me. Now, some people it does, and that's where we get into
Mhm.
all the interesting things of everybody's body
Yeah.
reacts differently to different things. But I felt really helpless. I'm like, here's my baby, my toddler, and when she's in pain, like there's literally nothing that I know to give her to
Mm.
relieve that, because I can't give her these things, and these are the only things I know how to use. And I'd already went down the food part, and I'm like,
Mhm.
if just changing my food had that profound healing for me personally,
Right.
what if I started using plants for medicine? So that put me down herbalism training, but also like really wanting to know how these work, all the safety aspects, what they're actually doing in the body, um, how they work together, all of those different things. And so I took my pharmacy, like that part of that background that I
Mhm.
had, and use that in my research. So like I wanted to look at studies and clinical, and as well as anecdotal evidence, which is kind of more of like our folklore historic method of herbs. Like what was it used for back then? Is there clinical studies that we have now? And you don't have clinical studies on everything, unfortunately, because there's not a lot in the US, but looking into like I said, like the German E-Commission and different resources and that. And so I just did a ton of deep dives. in studying all of that for she's now she'll be 16 next month. So if I can do math, 13 years. And it has been fascinating. And I've actually I mean, like, it's actually really fun, but like our
Mhm.
whole natural medicine cabinet is pretty much all herbs and tinctures. And my husband is like bless him. He's like the biggest skeptic. He's like, prove it. And so it was really fun because I had all these herb remedies done. And I still remember, like, he started to come down with something. And I'm like, I've been waiting. And so I'm like, take this and take this and take that. And it was phenomenal because the next day he's like, I don't know what you gave me, but that stuff worked. Like, I cannot believe how much better I feel. And so now when he starts to come down with stuff and the kids, they'll ask for it. They're like, Mom, do you have the, tincture for XYZ or the tea for, whatever syrup? And so it's been so much fun to see, especially for my kids, like they'll have that foundation to build on,
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
their own children and going down. But in maybe it's just my personality and my husband's, but I'm like, oh, good, because he's never going to say something is as good or better if he doesn't really think it. In fact, he's probably my biggest critic. So when he's like, when I get that sign of approval from him, I'm like, yes. Um,
Right.
yeah. So that was a probably very long-winded way of answering your question. Did I
No,
actually
it's
answer your
perfect.
question? Okay.
It's actually perfect. So you have some of this in your book that you're republishing,
Yeah.
and then you talk about it a little bit. I mean, you also have a podcast. I mean, that's one thing we've brought it up a couple of times, but if people want to hear more, you have your own podcast. And I've seen that you've had like some roundtables talking about herbalism and a few other things. And herbalism is certainly, I would not call myself an expert whatsoever. I'd call myself a very beginner novice, even though we've used it a lot.
Yeah.
So it's something that really interests me, and I'm always trying to find information that I can trust. And it's so hard to find that because, like you said, they do have interactions, and because they're strong, they they do heal or not heal or treat. I'm always really careful how I use them because they could also harm just like anything else could. So yeah, just finding places that I trust, that I can validify that this is a trustworthy source, has
Yeah.
become really concerning, especially just in our modern world with the internet. You never know what you can trust. Do you have ways that you've figured it out? I mean, I know you talked about going over, using the German e-commission.
Yeah, and with the Germany Commission, I think there is some of it. Some of it may be available online, but I actually paid for like a medical
Right.
practitioner level in order to be able to fully access it, which
Yeah, and that's what becomes hard is you can access those as a medical professional.
right.
As a layman, though, I don't know how to access
Yeah,
stuff.
and I'm trying to remember if there is like a lower tier level, where you can access some of
Yeah.
it. I'm not 100% sure on that one with the German Commission specifically, but um so there's the American Guild Herbalist. I believe I'm saying that right. And they have some forward facing things and will usually put like reference notes. So for me, that's a big deal. Like, is there
Mhm.
sources cited and what are
Yeah.
these sources? And I am somebody like, even with the Germany Commission, like I check 2 to 3 sources because I want to see, is there any different? Is somebody highlighting something different? So I'm a multiple source fact
Right.
checker before, and so there's that and then there is yeah, the American Guild Herbalist. I do look there and they do provide some sources and they have different levels of like what's free, what's not,
Right.
like that type of thing. I actually have an herbal course for home and cold, or excuse me, for a home herbalist, but for cold and flu in particular. Cause I'm like, that's usually the things that, especially with kids or my husband and I, like, you're going to deal with one way or another, at least yearly, like one
Mhm.
cold or one flu or whatnot. And so I've got that. And that is a combination of the Germany Commission and like 5 different books.
Okay.
Um,
And
and
that's on your
so
website, correct?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that one is really deep and going into on each of them. Plus, needing to know like if you're pregnant or breastfeeding,
Right.
are
Right.
those herbs safe? And some are and some aren't, and some are safe for pregnancy, and some aren't safe for pregnancy, but they're safe if you're breastfeeding. Some are safe for children, some aren't safe for children. There's different dosing depending on your medical conditions. That was the biggie for me with my daughter. Not only what can I give her, but what do I need to stay away from because of
Right.
her blood
Yeah.
clotting disorder? Yeah. So I don't have like one source that's like, I think that's
Right.
the complexity of it, right? That's like all. So
Mhm.
for me, it was multiple different sources. I want to see sightings. I want to see references, and ideally clinical, meaning where you've got clinical herbalists, and so they are actually treating clients, and so
Mm.
seeing what it looks like in the real world, not just from textbook.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
And so I really like to see that as well. So kind of all of that, but it does make it hard because I can't say like go use this one source because I don't know that that one source exists. But also I don't think it should. I wouldn't want to just have it be one source
Yeah.
either.
Right.
Like I think it's really
No.
important. But there is one of the herbalists that I really enjoy and have gotten a chance to get is Kaylee Richardson, and she has an herbal book coming out with Homestead Living. It actually releases, it's on pre-order now, and it releases this summer. And Keely's is fascinating. She's also a clinical herbalist, but she's a beekeeper, and so she's done a ton of research on like honey and the help of the bees, and even the propolis from bees, and like combining that with your herbs, and the plants, like really fascinating. And so that she's a really good resource too. um,
Perfect.
she was a nurse and then also a clinical herbalist, and is like top notch on her research too. So she's a one of my trusted sources as well.
I think I might need that book.
Yes.
I think I would just talk to your husband about actually what works and what doesn't and go with that.
Okay, well the course is for you, Harold, because all of the tinctures and the teas that he requests are in there.
Well, Melissa, I don't want to tie you up all day, but I do want to give you a chance to plug your book. But I will also tell people that they can find you at the Pioneering Today podcast, melissaknorris.com. We got the Modern Homesteading Conference and Homestead Living Magazine are all things that you're involved with and doing some phenomenal work there. You got several books. You can plug any of them you want, but I know the one that you have getting ready to come out is the one you really want to get out there. And I think it's a great resource. And I think folks should get their hand on it. So how do they get this on pre-order?
Yeah, thanks. So it's home and handmade. And if you go to melissaknorris.com and just click on that little books tab, you'll see it. And right now we've got some pretty incredible pre-order bonuses. So if you pre-order it before May 6th, some of the bonuses will still be available after that. But right now we have over $275 worth of discounts and coupon codes, from some of my favorite companies and are just products that I use. So Redmond Real Salt, for example, Homegrown Herbalist, Azure Standard, talking about wheat berries and getting
Yeah.
good products for things you're not growing your own. So they have partnered together and provided some really fabulous discount codes and coupons for products that you get when you pre-order the book. And then I actually created some bonus videos. And so one of the videos is a tincture making video. So walking people through tincture making, like, what you really need to know, especially if you're looking to get the strongest true medicinal properties from herbs with your tinctures, which we all would like. I'm at
Mhm.
least, I'm like, yeah. So making a sourdough starter, fermenting vegetables. So you get some bonus videos along with the book, and then all those discount codes. Um, so I highly encourage people to hop over there and pre-order their copy and get all of those bonuses.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's generous. That's a lot of good stuff
Yeah.
right there. For
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Well, folks, I think you should definitely get the book. Like I said, I've went through it. It looks pretty good. How many recipes are in there?
Oh gosh.
There's a blank.
Oh,
Yeah, it said
There's
there was a number in there, but I don't remember what it was.
I know. I'm like,
There's
I
a
don't want
lot.
to misspeak. I know there was over 20 new ones. I think like 80 or 100.
Yeah,
A
there's a
lot.
lot.
Yeah,
There's a
it's pretty
lot in
much
there.
full cookbook.
Yeah.
I
And
don't
plus
want
just
to
some good
misspeak.
information. Yeah, just some good information in there as well. It's a great book. Folks should definitely pick it up and take advantage of these. If you're listening to this early enough, I know these podcasts stay up for a long time, but if you're hearing this anytime soon, get those bonuses. That's some good stuff right there that's added in. So great stuff. Melissa, I really appreciate you coming on today and telling us all about it. You have so much good
Yeah.
information. So I appreciate it.
It is
And,
such a
Guys.
pleasure to talk to you in person. It's just been a pleasure to meet you.
Maybe we
you
won't wait
guys
so
too.
long next time before we have you on again.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's make this yes, we need to
Yeah,
set something
far
up. We
too
shouldn't
long.
go like 8 years without talking.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, I'll let you go. Until next time, folks, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.